everyone, welcome to yet another video in this, the Clown Decade. The decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And in today's episode we are looking at someone who self-describes as non-binary but still goes by he, they pronouns, and who was on EFAP recently thinking he knows absolutely everything about art because he went to a few art galleries and just regurgitated absolutely everything he was told about the artists and what they felt about their own pictures, or paintings or exhibits or whatever the hell you want to talk about. Anyway, I was interested in this Ethan is Online character, so I took a quick look at his channel and decided to land upon this subject that, personally, I actually think the accounts he is talking about are a bit cringe, but at the same time his arguments are so entrenched in leftism that I just couldn't help but not go through them. He has made me like Twitter accounts that I am at best indifferent to, and at worst find very annoying, so this is one hell of a dogmatic person. Anyway, let's hear what he has to say.
Hi. Who are these weird dudes going around posting about sculptures? Oh, this was sculpted by a 23-year-old. This was sculpted by a 14-year-old. What's your excuse? Well, guess what, dude? Those motherfuckers didn't have anything else to do.
I mean, since he brought it up, we will focus on it, but this is the abduction of Proserpina. I am using that title for this piece of art because the other one will get me demonetized. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is one of the most impressive sculptures that I have ever seen in my life. It is absurdly realistic, and if we have a quick look at Proserpina, maybe quite hard to see, but you can actually see a physical tear on her cheek trickling down it that is etched into the marble. Yes, this is incredibly impressive. The fact it was done by someone in their early 20s is even more impressive because this shows pure natural talent. He may have had, I don't know, 5-6 years to actually properly hone his skills, and to get to that level already, yes, incredibly impressive. The best you can say to that is, oh well, they didn't have anything better to do. I don't think many people have better things to do than hone their talents. In other words, I'm saying that that is a very poor excuse, and if you have these talents, absolutely do pursue them. That's why I have a job as a software developer. I am good at that. It is one of my talents. And this is why, in the meantime, I make commentary videos like this. I'm also quite good at that. I don't have the time to properly hone it as I would like to, but hey, we all make sacrifices.
I've seen accounts like this pop up at least 6 times in the last year, and I'm only now realizing that I've just seen a Socrates Stan account post Wojak memes.
I mean, absolutely every account posts Wojak memes at this point. They're just a part of the culture these days. But yes, there are a lot of art appreciation accounts, and a lot of them do indeed have this nostalgia for the past, we'll say. And I think that's fair to say because modern art is indeed absolutely terrible. I mean, just look at the type of things that we end up putting on the 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square. Look at it, it's an ice cream with a drone on, a cherry on top and a fly on it. Who wants to see that?
There's a handful of accounts like this. They're kind of like little bugs and roaches that you find underneath a big rock. They mainly post little quips and jabs about how uncivilized modern society is because gay people are walking around, and we should go back to the good old days, like the 14th century, where they didn't have toilets or a way to flush their dookie out into the street.
You need to throw an example out here, man, because absolutely every tweet you have shown so far seems to have had absolutely nothing to do with politics. In fact, so far you have shown me 2 accounts and only one of them has actually shown me any art so far. You need to be slightly better than this. Not because I think you're lying, but mainly because I don't really know the type of people you're referring to apart from this one guy, this culture critic, who, let's be fair, his bar for good art and bad art is quite clear in this image alone. And I mean, if you're just saying, oh, these people don't like gay people, if you're taking that from a giant butt plug in the middle of a square in public, then once again I just have to feel bad for all the homosexual people who don't want their entire identity entirely based around their sexual fetishes. But videos like this do not help, so unlucky.
And they also post things like make skyscrapers cathedrals again, asking Elon Musk to fund that venture. Cathedrals, of course, being very efficient to build, and easy too.
Well, that's part of cultural critics' point. It's not easy. That's why he wants more of it, because it is genuinely impressive. Just this picture alone, 9 times out of 10 people are going to prefer the look of this building in the foreground that looks a bit more interesting than the glass towers and concrete jungles in the background. And the thing is, this building was built in the 1920s, We actually have the technology that makes it much easier to put up skyscrapers much quicker than it used to, whether they are concrete, glass prefabs or not. We would rather have a city skyline that looks a bit more like 1930s New York than it does 2023. Because the fact of the matter is, it's just more interesting. They look nicer, they are imposing in an almost inspiring way. Barely anyone is inspired by the Shard, because it is just a glass triangle.
Accounts like this, unfortunately, are always a little more insidious than they seem on the surface, so I've decided to do some digging into this account and a couple of others to find out what it means to be a traditionalist online.
You can pause the video at this point, go to the comment section and say, hey, at about 6 minutes in, I think he's going to say that the insidiousness is X, Y, or Z. 9 out of 10 of you are going to get it correct, because this man is more predictable than what happens to a window when you throw a brick at it. Oh, and by the way, his sponsor for this video is literally a prostate vibrator. I'm just saying Ethan's not doing himself any favours when Cultural Critic says only people who are degenerate will disagree with me. But hey, let's focus on his arguments, I suppose.
Culture Critic is an account with about 250,000 followers. He works at education. Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire.
Yeah, a video like this, a lot of comedy on the BBC and things like that these days, it's not there to actually educate you. This isn't there to actually make an argument. This is here to just disparage someone. That's all this is there for. That's why I didn't make any sort of argument against that great quote by Gustav Mahler. And for those of you who don't know, he was a romantic composer in the late 19th century. And just so you know, for context for later on in the video, just bear in mind this is a quote specifically that Cultural Critic has chosen, was by a man whose music was banned by the Nazis. Just want you to bear that in mind. Again, he's predictable. You've already made your predictions on what he's going to say. So I may as well just telegraph it because you already know.
Accounts like these with famous sculptures as their profile pictures love to post things that seem profound, but are actually only things an antisocial middle schooler would think is cool to say.
See, he was doing this type of thing in EFAT, but I'll mention it here as well. This man cannot stop poisoning the well. It's all he knows how to do. In that, an excellent point about tradition, in that you are not worshipping ashes of a bygone era, but instead are trying to keep alive what is and what has lasted for possibly centuries. Apparently that's just an edgy thing someone who's 14 would say. You know, he's saying it's a this is 14 and this is deep type thing. When, if that's your case, you need to start bringing in examples, you know? Come on, give me something to work with.
Of course, on the surface, these are all just pictures of buildings and statues, right?
See what I mean? It's just so dismissive, and it's not even what he's doing. It's, oh, this is just a bunch of pictures of statues and buildings. No. They are specific buildings and statues. Ones that an awful lot of people can agree are very, very, very impressive. My problem with them is that they seem to want these things absolutely everywhere and think we've failed as a society if they are not everywhere. When in reality, these statues and buildings will have only been seen in major cities where the royalty or the upper classes will have all congregated and will have appreciated this type of art and even be able to have these buildings and statues commissioned. That's the reality of it. They wouldn't be in some backward market town in the middle of the Yorkshire Dales. Now, they will have still had art and lovely buildings, and generally they were much more lovely than the standard flats, apartments and houses that you see being built today. A possible reason for that I'm quite convinced by is because they were seen as people's homes. They were seen as things that people wanted to build, not just for themselves, but for their children and their children's children. Whereas these days, they are just seen as commodities that need to be put up as quickly as possible. Now, I am a type of NIMBY who does think that more buildings need to be built, but my God, I completely understand and even agree with new build hate. They are not aesthetically pleasing houses, and they are not even good from an urban planning perspective, because there is no mixed use. It's just to plop a load of houses in one place, burn down a crooked pub while you're at it.
Like an account that posts dogs every day, but instead you post the Sistine Chapel. Normal.
I mean, I don't care if it's normal or not. I don't consider myself normal, so I really don't care if someone who looks like this says that something isn't normal, because odds are it actually probably is. But if an account wants to post good-looking dogs and do that every day, that's fine. I don't see the issue with that, or doing it for ridiculously beautiful pieces of art and architecture. I don't see a problem with that, and I don't know what your problem is. But boy, everyone in my comments has probably guessed correctly.
In fact, the format is so normal that we forget to question the substance of what they're posting and the context. When you see an account that posts like funny cats on skateboards or whatever, you have no reason to assume that they have an agenda. But art and architecture are political, and praising certain eras of art and disparaging others has political connotations to it.
So Ethan here is obviously the type of person to say everything is political, and he is especially doubling down on that when it comes to art and architecture. However, I don't really know why, if he thinks everything and all art is political, he doesn't think that a cat on a skateboard isn't political. But either way, Cultural Critic really doesn't hide the fact that he does have an agenda here anyway, so I don't know why Ethan is trying to claim that there's some insidious hidden messages behind what he's saying, because he's just open about it. He thinks that a lot of people these days are either lazy, or the people in charge of making the decisions on what art and architecture gets approved are actively trying to demoralize people, and then that's why we've ended up with the terrible modern art we see in a lot of places today, and why a lot of buildings that are popping up around, especially in my hometown of Manchester, seem to be focusing more on getting about 20 skyscrapers up quickly rather than saying, hey, we need to make this look pretty good. Our first skyscraper was this thing, and I'm going to be honest, I never looked at that and thought, oh man, I am absolutely ecstatic that this glass monstrosity has been placed right next to historical warehouses that, no matter where you put them in England, never seem out of place. Apparently it was supposed to look like an icicle, but I'd just rather it wasn't there, or looked more like any of the other skyscraper cathedrals that we have pointed out before.
And if you have a big enough following, the pattern of those implications can become a very lucrative agenda.
I really do hate all these accusations of grifter. I actually think very few people are in it just for the grift. I'm not going to be here saying, oh, I think Ethan is simply here for a grift on left-wingers who hate anyone to the right of Mao. I don't think that's what he's in it for. But when it comes down to it, I would assume that it is a lot more projection than anything else. And this video is dripping with projection. You will see.
Oh, so you're saying buildings are political now, you gay leftist? Yeah, a lot of things are political, and it doesn't necessarily mean something negative.
My god, I'm going to need a little bit more detail on what you mean by political. Because a lot of the time what people mean by X, Y, or Z is political. What they mean is that they are reflecting the values of the artist who made them. And from architects I know who are currently in university and elsewhere, while a lot of them do indeed have their values on their mind at some point, to be honest, a lot of the time they are just trying to make buildings useful.
It's just the thing that makes conservatives really annoyed. Something being political is generally seen as like a bad thing, when it should be seen as something that everybody is affected by and can participate in.
Alright, cool. And the way that Cultural Critic is trying to get involved in and participate in the politics of statue artistry and architecture is by having a huge account where he's saying, this stuff's good, this stuff's bad. And I'd wager that the popularity of an account like that is simply down to the fact that the things that he is saying are good are universally seen as very, very good because they are up to a high standard that a lot of people can agree on and understand, such as the statues we saw at the beginning, where a realistic, almost action shot has been sculpted incredibly meticulously into marble, and it probably took him years. People can understand how that's impressive, and even if they can't understand how it is impressive, they can understand how it is aesthetically pleasing, probably in part due to its realism, and also probably in part due to a lot of other complex things I really can't be bothered to get into at the moment. So what then is the issue with this account?
That being said, this is bad politics.
Oh, so you then don't agree with what he thinks is good and what he thinks is bad. You think this giant butt plug in the middle of a square, public square, is good? You think that's good art? You think the whipped cream with a cherry on top and a fly on, you think that's good art? Not a lot of people seem to agree.
Really, really bad, actually. Fascists have to hijack modern methods of expression to normalize their message, even though they claim to hate them.
To all of you in the comments that said I bet he calls him a fascist, well done. You get a pat on the back for noticing very, very obvious patterns. Leftist, non-binary person on the internet thinks that account is bad because he is putting up objectively beautiful creations and saying that they are objectively beautiful. Must be a fascist. I remember earlier when I talked about the quote, I decided to look it up because Culture Critic is not a fascist. There's no way of putting it. The man just appreciates good art. and apparently that makes you a fascist. But as mentioned before, the quote comes from not only a composer whose music the Nazis banned, but he was also Jewish. And given this guy has shown that he has absolutely no interest in using terms accurately, we could just assume that when he says fascist, he is using it synonymously with Nazi, which is not necessarily correct because Nazis are a subset of fascist, but this guy doesn't care.
They just can't help themselves but use Twitter and Facebook to build their platforms.
What the hell is that criticism? Of course they're going to use the most popular social media to build platforms. That's what everyone does. That's what you do. So far his argument has been that fascists have to use very insidious methods to build a platform, like using social media like everyone else. What criticism is this? You're not even explaining how he's a Nazi. I have no idea what makes you think he's a Nazi or a fascist. Whatever.
On top of being able to form their connections with other fascists and, of course, put links in their bio.
Yes, all Culture Critic's links in his link tree are to threads and Instagram where he posts similar things. Again, this is just what anyone who is good at social media marketing does. Your criticism here is really, really strange.
Jordan Peterson has hours of lectures dedicated to the horrors of postmodernism, and yet he is the most Twitter-addicted man I have ever seen.
Well, I do agree from time to time Jordan Peterson should probably avoid Twitter. I don't see how that's a contradiction or in any way a refutation that people... I mean, I nearly said fascist, but Jordan Peterson isn't a fascist, but let's say people who are critical of postmodernism shouldn't be allowed on Twitter. What part of criticising postmodernism means that you can't use Twitter? In what way is Twitter a specifically postmodern space? Because it's not. It's just a human space. It's a space for anyone. Ideally, anyway.
Speaking of links in bio, not one, not two, not three, but 4 of the accounts I researched for this video had something that you can buy from them. Man, it's almost like there's some kind of common ground here. I can't see it at all.
Dude, your video description has a link to Patreon. What are you talking about? And as we went through with Cultural Critic, which is the only person that you've actually brought up so far, as I went through his link tree for you, there is nothing there to actually buy anything. Both his Threads and Instagram account, they both just have links back to his Twitter. So this already is a really poorly put together video. All you had to do was structure it slightly better. You can't just make these claims because I don't know who else you mean. If you mean Jordan Peterson, yes, he is selling products. He is selling his books. He is selling his courses that have, oddly enough, helped quite a lot of people to get out of the pit you're in. You are breaking one of his rules, which is don't be an ideologue. You are literally being an ideologue because you've actually given absolutely no good reason as to why I shouldn't like these accounts. You're just saying they're grifters. Cultural Critic isn't even a grifter. As far as I can tell, he's not making money on it apart from on Twitter because you can subscribe to him. Which, believe it or not, is just the exact same thing you're doing when you put Patreon in your video description, which you have done.
Conservatives and just general dumb guys online like to pretend that being a leftist on the internet is some kind of easy grift, when if you're a conservative, all you need to do is post a picture of the Mona Lisa and say, "What happened? Why did artists stop making art? It's not art, it's a toilet. It doesn't say anything."
The pure irony of Ethan here trying to make the point that being a conservative or an idiot online is such an easy grift compared to being a leftist. This man is basically saying, I am putting a lot of effort into this video. He hasn't made any argument so far. He's just said, my enemy is Big Dum Dum. Doesn't put effort into anything and then makes a lot of money from it. All this guy has done is set up his camera in a few different places, seen Twitter, made a few idiotic statements, and then done a video. That's how he's done it. And this has clearly been done over multiple days because he's changed his outfit. But this image on the screen, it just accentuates the point that on the left you have got something that takes skill, took years to hone, involves talent, and is very, very pleasing to look at. I understand why that is funny because I'm saying it with the one statue that is completely naked and his penis is hanging out, but still, you get what I mean. And then on the right, you have literally just got a tipped over urinal. That's it. And he has the audacity to say that you don't understand anything about art if you think the picture of the urinal that's upturned is absolutely terrible art. And I am one of those people with that opinion because I don't really care if the artist had any intention of saying anything. That didn't take any effort compared to the Michelangelo's David. I don't really care if art took a lot of effort or not. I am one of those weird people that does kind of like AI generated art. I just don't want art to look like crap. And that's quite difficult to do when you put a literal toilet in front of me.
What uneducated peasants built during the Dark Ages versus what educated PhDs built today. Does he think that PhDs physically build buildings they design?
No, he's being hyperbolic. He's saying that despite the vast amount of advances we have made in engineering, in the discovery of forces and physics and development of how they can be applied, what it has resulted in is just big concrete monstrosities that aren't exactly screaming vibrant colours, but instead are just screaming sounds of pain in a architectural way.
Because there were educated people designing Gothic architecture. They, like, literally weren't peasants that designed it. They were slaves that built it.
Oh, no. The cathedrals will not have been built by slaves because there would have had to have been too much skill involved in making something that important, especially to the church. They will have been master builders and stonemasons involved, and that's why it took nearly 2 centuries to build the Florence Cathedral. Again, he's just made something up and he gets money for it. And apparently it's the right-wingers that are the grifters. As far as I can tell, it's all just been personal opinion from everyone who's referenced who's quote-unquote right-wing, even though it's just people who say, I like these particular buildings and this particular art. You can come from any side of the political spectrum and say that. You're an idiot if you think you can only be left-wing and like architecture and art that is objectively awful.
Without a single degree, they created art that inspired generations, and then artists with degrees arrived. Fun fact about Van Gogh, took his own life, unfortunately, and a big part of that is because he was living in constant poverty throughout his life. The cultural critics at the time actually hated his art and rejected it every time he tried to show it. He painted Starry Night in an asylum at the lowest point of his life, and died years before anyone recognized his talent. So it's always very interesting to me that conservatives now shit on modern art as if that hasn't been the pattern for boundary-pushing art throughout all of history.
Well, that's an incredibly stupid thing to say after you did that whole Van Gogh story. From the story you have just said, it is the people with degrees but the equivalent back in the 19th century are actually saying that Van Gogh's work is terrible. And that's what currently modern people with degrees are saying today. They're saying that the awful stuff is good and the type of stuff we want to see in public and put up architecturally, and the beautiful stuff, well, if it's not a historically recognised building, just tear the thing down. Just replace it with these bananas taped to walls and these blank canvases. The only reply we have to say is then, oh, so this problem's actually been around a lot longer than we thought. Experts in the field will push out what the unwashed masses think is actually excellent art. Quite frankly, because any outsider having any sort of criticism or anything to say about these artists, the experts have deemed to be almost saints in the field. Yeah, no, we got to ignore all that. They're just fascists, according to Ethan. It's just a crazy position.
Fascists have a tendency to insist that modern art is horrible and disgusting and degenerate.
Yes, a giant pub plug in the middle of a public square. That is degenerate, yes. I am happy with that position.
Even though the term modern art can date as far back as the 1870s.
Yes, I know that, Mr. Pedantic. None of them care. They don't care for any of this terminology that the professionals all put out, whether it's accurate or not. They just know they like things that look good and took effort and blood, sweat and tears to make, and dislike things that aren't aesthetically pleasing and took absolutely no effort to make. No matter what you say about Jackson Pollock, absolutely anyone can make a Jackson Pollock. He literally just splatters paint on a horizontal surface.
These guys don't like to think about that, though. They just, misrepresent modern art by the duct tape banana wall, which, sure seems to affect them, which is kind of like the goal of art, is to make you feel things.
I mean, from this I would assume that he agrees that the banana duct tape to a wall is bad art. From if I were just to take this video at face value there, I would assume that he actually agrees it's not very good art. Problem is, though, is that he actually does think it's good art. He says it in the video that they covered on EFAP. And it appears that according to him, as long as it makes you feel something, it's good art. Absolutely everything can make you feel something. I have this very, very large feeling of disgust whenever I see some dog turds in the street. I get a feeling there. Is that art? Has the dog made art there? This idiot would probably say yes if it was labelled. Art specifically needs to be something that has been produced to be appreciated for its beauty or emotional power. A banana duct taped to a wall, I think it's going to be quite hard to appreciate that for beauty because it's just not beautiful. And when it comes to emotional power, I think you're really coping when you say that there is raw emotional power coming from these people for that particular piece of art, because it's not really about that piece of art that they're getting angry over. It's more about the fact that some idiot who was curating that museum or gallery decided that that was such good artwork, it is worth keeping up there, and also replacing when some guy ate it. I mean, at this point, you are exactly the fart huffing type of people from San Francisco in that South Park episode.
But the main reason fascists hate modern art is because it's disproportionately made by queer people, people of color, or people from otherwise marginalized backgrounds.
No, I think they hate it because it's garbage. A lot of the people posting this content, they will not give a damn who made them. Hell, Leonardo da Vinci was thought to be gay and they seem to appreciate his art pretty good. So no, try again. You've got to give me something more substantive than that, because that is literally just a slur at this point.
There are obvious exceptions, like Jackson Pollock, for example.
They don't care. They don't care that Jackson Pollock was a straight white man. They just think his art's terrible.
But the people who push boundaries tend to live in the margins of society where boundaries don't mean as much. Because the boundaries that can confine art are based in the same principles that likely dictate marginalized people's material conditions.
Well, I'm glad he appreciates that an awful lot of modern art, and we do just mean the bad type of modern art, the type that is just a toilet that has been flipped upside down, is there just to push boundaries of society. That's all it's there for. But boundaries can be pushed constantly in a much, much better way, much more entertaining way, much more sophisticated way than just sticking a banana to a wall, having a pineapple under a piece of glass, and having a toilet turn upside down, or any of the number of vagina museums that seem to be about everywhere these days. Yeah, in other words, people are noticing just how terrible it's all getting, and they're getting fed up with it. Probably why Culture Critic is so popular.
White supremacy.
Give yourself another pat on the back if you put white supremacy down in the comments.
So yeah, when people post, why can't we have big cathedrals instead of big skyscraper, there's a little taste of fascism there.
You're such a little slippery weasel. It's gone from full-blown, yes, these people are fascists and I don't like them, to just, every time someone says to you that this statue that looks beautiful is good, and it's a photorealistic statue, or this cathedral's really nice, this famous, cathedral, a big, huge structure in the support of Christianity, that is actually someone supporting fascism right there. Fascism and Nazism, two things that hated Christianity. Yeah, right, that's what it is.
Not to mention, it's very similar to the attitudes that self-identified fascists did have in the 1930s. Modernism is a form of degeneracy, is a dead giveaway for someone being a really fucking weird guy.
Dude, you think you're non-binary and pronouns are he, they? Don't give me that other people are weird. You yourself you're doing your best to try and be weird, and it's just coming off really uncomfortable.
Posting pictures of just disgusting and nasty and so stinky an apartment complex is, it kind of implies a similar distaste for the people living inside.
This is such a ridiculous leap. I don't think Culture Critic here is saying that he absolutely hates working class people who have been forced to live inside these concrete jungles of depression. He obviously doesn't think it's their fault. He knows that they are forced into that. He's just saying, wouldn't it be better if they were in buildings that were a lot more beautiful? Buildings that look like they were built to last. Buildings that look like they are there for the people inside and around them, rather than for some faceless corporate or political figure who's far away in Moscow or something like that.
Like, yeah, no one likes cheap, shitty housing that's way more expensive than it should be.
Again, I think he's actually in agreement with Culture Critic here in that he is saying that, yes, indeed, these concrete jungles are bad, but I don't think he can actually bring himself around to properly say it in directly addressing it. He is saying here that, the poor have no choice but to be in terrible places to live. But he's literally doing some mental gymnastics to somehow blame Culture Critic for this because he's personally keeping people poor. By the way, Ethan, if you watch this, that's obviously hyperbole.
But rather than actually addressing the problems that capitalism creates...
Again, this guy's just getting his details wrong. This is Soviet apartment complexes. This was communist. This has nothing to do with capitalism. That's probably why Culture Critic chose the Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote to put in with this picture, because they are both critiques of communism. So I've got to bring it up again where he says, oh, a load of righties seem to think that being a leftist is just a grift and it's really easy. Yeah, it is. You're completely missing his point, you're not bringing up any arguments whatsoever, and you are getting multiple details wrong. And you still somehow nearly make £300 a month from this. Like, yeah, it does seem really easy to be a leftist on the internet. Thank you for being living proof of that.
That allows low-income housing to be so systemically neglected in this country, and they make it a cultural problem.
The thing is, even if you do build big apartment complexes that do look like just skyscraper cathedrals that make, makes Culture Critic happy and whatever, that is going to make housing in general cheaper. Just adding the housing stock does make housing cheaper. And again, there's a reason that he is looking at specifically I guess we can call them status symbol pieces of architecture, cathedrals, big skyscrapers built by corporations that are there to staple their place into the city. I mean, look at New York, the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building. They were there to show, hey, look, we have a business empire. We want to look good while running it. That was the point of it, but these days, because everything is so globalized, all these skyscrapers need to be up quickly so that there can be different countries with headquartered offices from other countries who really don't care how their offices look in New York, say if you're a British company, or in London if you're a New York company, something like that. And I don't see a good reason that social housing has to look like big concrete struts. Nobody thinks that council housing blocks look great in England, and there's no reason we can't build them as mid-rise townhouses.
There's a culture of people being poor and icky and making me sad. It's subtle, but it's a consistent theme in accounts like these.
No, again, you've just completely projected your politics onto this. They just want good-looking buildings. They're not saying anything about the people who live inside them. They are saying things about the people who design them and the people who allow these designs to go through. That's all they're talking about. But you think everything is political, and you think absolutely everything's about class, and you think these people are effectively upper-class snobs. Well, the reality of the situation is that they are probably actually lower to middle class people, because lower class people or working class people don't like the look of these things either.
These accounts are also really childish with how they analyze things. All they basically say is big old stuff is good, ugly new stuff is bad.
Yeah, it's a really simple open goal, but it's exactly like the low IQ, mid-wit and high IQ meme. The mid-wit like you will make excuses for why Jackson Pollock, a banana stuck to a wall, and an upside-down urinal are all fascinating pieces of art, when in reality it is much more fascinating to look at something like the birth of Venus or the abduction of Proserpina. And it's the same with housing, though for some reason when it comes to architecture, you've not actually defended brutalism, I notice.
Because they have to appeal to the most basic feelings that people have without addressing any systemic issues, because they can't give away too much of their own agenda.
Dude, your whole video has been literally appealing to leftists' disgust. You have appealed to nothing else. You haven't made an argument. All you've done is try to insult these people, make them out to be stupid, call them childish, and you haven't really substantiated that with anything, because you can't really do that with these accounts, because all they really do is post pictures of beautiful and ugly things, and half the time they don't even have to give you a caption telling you which is which, because it's just so obvious to people.
They can't talk about how much they hate poor people. They can't talk about how similar they are to Nazis in the 1930s.
If there's one thing that you can't say about Nazis in the 1930s, it's that they didn't have drip. They did have good style, they did have good fashion sense. They had Hugo Boss designing their uniforms, for God's sake. One of the big things was focusing in on aesthetics. They needed a good aesthetic. They wanted their country to be beautiful. And guess what? So did every other country in the world. It has been true throughout time. It just so happens that the Nazis liked good architecture and liked good aesthetics. Well, my God, if that's all it takes to call me a Nazi, then you have something seriously wrong with you. This is no different than saying, oh, Hitler was a vegetarian, therefore if you're a vegetarian, really you're a Nazi. You're hiding your Nazism. It's just such a pathetic argument. As I've said before, everything he's saying is simply projection. Aside from this Nazi thing, he's just saying the Nazi thing because he's an idiot.
There's a difference between appreciating art and appreciating certain kinds of art made by certain kinds of people in certain kinds of contexts. Art is inherently political because it reflects the attitudes of a culture at a certain time.
I don't think I agree with that. Well, not in absolutely every single case, anyway. Obviously, if you're, say, writing a modern book or painting a picture of the modern world, Yes, that is a reflection of the world as you see it today. Whether if we take the example of J.R.R. Tolkien, he could have written Lord of the Rings at any point in time. And I know there are people out there that say, oh, well, the orcs and Saruman, they're supposed to be representative of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, and there are even bigger idiots out there who are saying orcs are basically just black people. But you don't have to have lived at some point in Britain's Industrial Revolution to have written that. You can say how cities in general, such as Westminster throughout time, have been blots on the landscape if you're a nature lover. I'm just using this as an example to say not all art is specifically a reflection of the culture at the time it was made, and I think that would be a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, for God's sake, the abduction of Proserpina, that was sculpted in the 17th century, and it's actually a reflection of Roman mythology. You know, mythology that goes back over 1,500 years before it was sculpted. So yeah, that was just a stupid thing to say by Ethan.
It's impossible to separate even the most realistic art from its political and social context. Take the Gross Clinic, for example, which was seen as an incredible masterpiece in the late 1800s and the standard for academic realism. This was unveiled just a few years after Dance at the Moulin, which, like many other Impressionist paintings at the time, was not seen as praiseworthy in the slightest. It was seen as amateurish and childish. Academic realism was the only acceptable mainstream form of expression in the French art world, and because of how insular and exclusionary many French artists were at the time, and because of how influential their approval was, it pushed Impressionists to the margins to the point where they had to create their own salon to show their art in.
Right, yeah, but this is their problem, though. The problem is that the only things that appear to be accepted into art galleries and for architectural projects are completely ugly pieces of art and sculptures and buildings. They're saying they want the standards flipped as they are now, because it appears that trying to paint anything realistic doesn't typically get you put in art galleries anymore, and instead are replaced with bananas on walls. I really do hope you can understand that that is the issue here. The politics behind all this, none of it really matters. They're not having a go about that. Now, I do think there are political reasons that this is happening, but you are extrapolating an awful lot of nonsense from this that you are not substantiating with any sort of evidence. All you're saying is, they like beautiful old things and not awful new things. They must be fascists. It's just a hell of a leap to have absolutely no backing for. Aside from the Hitler was also a vegetarian argument.
It was a pivotal point in art history, and since then, art has only become more extreme, more expressive, more boundary pushing, and dare I say, even more queer. Even.
See, when he says things like this, I wish he would just understand that this is the only reason he's enjoying modern art. It's because it is being more on the side of LGBT plus people. And that's the reason that he has to go against them to this extent. Now, don't get me wrong, it might be the case that they just hate gay people and that's the reason they're going against modern art. But given that they also hate Jackson Pollock, I don't think that's the reason. But when it comes down to it, you've let the mask slip. This is why you want to keep these people ostracised. It's because you think that people with genuine talent are going to take space away from the queer community, who, let's face it, there probably is quite a lot of talent there, but it's the type of talent that's only put forward if they have the right on message. There are probably plenty of gay people who don't want anything to do with that and are making decent art that Culture Critic would very much like, but it's not getting out there because it's not right on, it's not on the message, it's not making the curators happy to push a political agenda. But I'm glad you've basically just admitted that the spotlight is only really there because it's becoming more queer. Like, yeah, a lot of people do have a problem with that because it is not rewarding talent or merit. It is just rewarding people for pushing the right agenda or opinions.
So not only are these guys fetishizing art that was made in a completely different century, in a completely different cultural context,
that isn't a reason that we can't make beautiful things like that again, though. You need to do better than this. In fact, saying, oh, this was done in the past, that just shows that we can do it again.
but they're also, signaling a little something about being out of line or stepping outside of boundaries. Boundaries from, like, the 1830s.
Of all the things that you have shown from these accounts, they either come from the 17th century or before, or they are early 20th century skyscrapers. There's actually been no examples from the 1830s or the 19th century. You've been bringing up examples of the 19th century, and these people would say they're good. But the thing is that you would say Van Gogh's work is good too. So your argument and your ideas are all over the place here. Please structure your videos better. I'm not sure what you're saying now.
The Art of Purpose is another Twitter account with over 200,000 followers, and yes, he does have an Elon Musk profile picture, and he mainly just posts the same kind of Instagram memes that are too mid to make it to iFunny. I am the millionaire educator that is turning Twitter into my personal art gallery. That is truly just so odd to say that.
Yeah, you don't seem to get that this is a meme account. I'm actually amazed that you don't understand that this is a meme account. Anyway, he goes through some tweets that this meme account has liked. They are very obviously memes, and he tries to claim that they are sincere posts. I have no idea why he's trying to do that. It's just so obviously a meme and a joke, the things that have been liked by that account. I don't know why he's even trying to claim that it's in full sincerity, and he agrees with it. One of the posts is literally just about someone making up a new word. I don't know why he's taking it seriously. So let's just skip this whole segment.
The Art of Purpose loves tweeting so much that he has a $50 class on how to write a tweet. He actually has several classes on how to build a business through social media, which seems kind of contradictory to how much he posts about all a man needing is a wife and family.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, you still need money to support a wife and family. But this has gone very off topic from the people who like ye old sculptures and whatever else are fascists. I don't know why he's gone on this tangent. I guess he's just calling these people grifters. Maybe they are. I don't know. I don't care. And if people want to pay for those courses and think they're useful, then more power to them. Maybe he's making something that's very useful, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm not going to review it. But he's certainly putting out a lot more useful things in the world than you are, Ethan. Anyway, he goes on about this and similar accounts for a while, and I don't know why he's brought up this account. From what I can tell, just from a quick glance through his Twitter account at the moment, I can't see anything he's saying about art, architecture, or sculpting. So I don't know why he's going on about it, but he is making a relatively decent case that he's a grifter, so maybe he's a grifter. I don't know, whatever. I don't know what this has to do with, well, what he's about to conclude here.
I don't really know how to end this video. These accounts suck and are weird, and not enough people understand how similar their worldview is to white nationalists.
There's actually very few white nationalists that are pro-Christian, so yeah, it doesn't seem like the Art of Purpose, who appeared to be sharing Christian memes, is anything like a fascist. When it comes to culture critic, again, all he literally does is say this stuff good, this stuff bad. Absolutely every type of person and group in history has said these particular aesthetics good, these ones bad. And I know the only reason you're singling out they're just like the Nazis is because you want to discredit these people in a really Weasley way. So overall, this video was just terrible. Guess I'm a Nazi for saying that a terrible video was terrible.
You can enjoy classical art all you want, but if you're using it as a historical bookmark to say maybe slavery wasn't so bad, at least we had beautiful buildings, just not good to do. No good.
Right, and absolutely none of the people that have appeared in this video even try to be slave apologists. In fact, I'd wager that Culture Critic, even if he is obviously American, would probably say that the British Empire did a very good thing abolishing slavery throughout the Atlantic, and I don't see any evidence that he wants slavery back. I think you just pulled that out of that lie you said about the Florence Cathedral being built by slaves. That just wasn't true either. You clearly don't know a damn thing. But hey, if just lying about these people and signalling your leftism gets you a load of money, who am I to stop the grift? Anyway, on the note of grifting, give me money. Give me a super thanks, or join my subscribe star, or become a channel member. I don't really care which. Laughing at the Guardian starts again soon. Maybe I can get more super chats that way. I don't know. I do this for a hobby. I do this for entertainment. I do this because I like informing people. I like putting my opinion out there. I like all you heroes in the chat and the comments who keep me going. A lot of you have been very, very nice recently. You've been very supportive, and I love that. Anyway, that's everything I had for you today. Ethan is online as an idiot, and that is how I will finish that off. So, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.
we're just a little bit more protective of our environment here in San Francisco.
Yeah, we sure are.